listeners, Kathy Lawless here, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people who are just starting out in their careers, or those who might be in transition or might be feeling stuck, giving them access to stories from other people who have been in the same boat they have, right? And who are experienced in their career and were probably, well, everybody's just started out at some point, but might have been in transition and stuck. And today we are talking to Kent Frazier, and he is the Chief Evolutionary Officer. And we'll get into what that means a little bit later, but he's got an extensive background in HR. Maybe that'll give you a little bit of a hint. So welcome, Kent.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate being here.
For my listeners, I always like to start with the icebreaker questions, which are the easy ones, right?
Yes, the layups.
The layups. Because that's how we get to know who you are and how you got to be who you are. So let's start with where you grew up, how many siblings, where were you in the birth order, and how you think that influenced you. So I always start with 7 questions.
Yes, right.
7 in 1.
Yes, I get it. Thank you. Yeah, so I grew up in a small suburb of Philadelphia, Quakertown, Pennsylvania. It's in Bucks County.
East Coast.
East Coast, yes. Family of 4, mom and dad, still alive, still married, 54 years,
wow,
which is pretty cool.
That is cool. I'm
the oldest of 2. I have a younger brother, John, who's 2 years younger than I am. And the role that birth order, is that what you asked?
Yeah. So the oldest, are you
the
typical?
oldest, yeah. I guess, I felt compelled to be good and do the things mom and dad wanted to do for part of the time, and then I stepped into let me push boundaries, and
which is what the oldest does too, right?
Exactly. Paved the way for little brother, so they're already shocked into what a teenage boy is going to become.
What's the age difference between
2 years?
2 years, okay.
Yeah.
And so growing up, did you guys play sports? Did you play instruments?
Yes and yes. Yeah, we were both very active in sports and very active musicians. And we were always kind of competitive in each of those things. And when we got to middle school, an interesting bifurcation happened. I drifted more towards athletics. My brother drifted more towards music. And
find your own way, right?
Found our own ways, and that was really nice because it gave us each an opportunity to express without having just this constant competitive tension between us.
Yeah.
But we really got to celebrate one another. And he's a better musician and I was a better athlete. So, we really got to celebrate one another in what we were better at and more inclined to pursue.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So what sports were you best at?
Oh gosh, I've played almost everything, but my go-to, I was a 3-season athlete: soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, and track and field in the summer.
Yeah.
But I've played tons of volleyball, golf, swimming, cycling. I've done triathlons. I love sports.
And you probably grew up in an era where you could do multiple sports. Now it seems like kids have to kind of specialize, right?
You have to be in one sport all year round if you want to get the college scholarship, or It's changed dramatically. It seems almost more like it's it becomes almost more of a job maybe for kids than just a hobby or something to be playful with.
Yeah, because you got to be really good.
Yes.
In order to make the high school team, and really good in order to make a club team. It's so competitive. My friends have youngsters in this track, and we've been watching them for the last 5 and 6 years, and it's crazy. And yet I grew up in an era where I played volleyball. I skipped basketball, wasn't very good at that. And then I ran track and field too, and I love that.
Yeah.
And I think it helped me, it helped my body not get overused. And I think it overall made my body stronger because I was using different muscles for different things. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
What instruments did you play, even though you didn't stick with them?
No, I stick with them. I did stick with them. Yeah, sure. And I'm still a musician. So I started with piano at a young age, and then moved as MTV came on the scene. I'm like, I gotta get a guitar.
Of course.
Yes. So guitar has been my love and one of my best friends for the past 40 years.
Oh.
And I performed a lot in my life. I used to, through college, I would perform 3 nights a week out at venues and bars, and it really became a passion of mine.
Wow.
I love performing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what did your brother do that he was so good at?
He plays guitar as well, and quite a a protege. At a very young age, he was getting looked at by recording artists. He got a publishing contract with Famous Music when he was 18, which was part of Paramount. And he was playing in New York City at CBGB's and some of the big kind of prominent music scene venues at a very young age. And we're all like, oh my gosh, he's going to be a rock star. And then it didn't happen. Which influenced me in a lot of my choices as I was playing and performing in college. I had this notion of never wanting to be the broke musician. Mm-hmm. And I can come back to that a little bit later because I actually ended up becoming a broke musician at one point in time. I was like, oh, it's okay, actually.
Well, what's funny is that when you talk about performing, that leads into kind of the next two questions, which is on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato, 5 being life of the party, where would you put yourself?
Yeah, I traditionally have been at a 5. I always felt like it was my role to infuse all the energy and excitement and enthusiasm. I don't know if you know the Enneagram at all.
Oh yeah, I just recently did that.
I'm an Enneagram 7, which is the enthusiast and, just really always wanting everyone to be happy and having a good time. And so I took the role of MC.
I wanted to be a 7 and I ended up a 6, I think.
Oh, well, I got a 6 wing,
okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, so that's...
But so I always felt like I had to do that, and eventually it became quite exhausting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you take that on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and a similar scale, taking risks, scale 1 to 5, where would you put yourself?
Yeah, probably 4. I've always lived a little bit more towards following an instinctual pull or a heartfelt pull versus the logical, rational discernment. So
you trust your gut for decision making?
I do. Mm-hmm. And my heart.
Okay. So
what's really feeling
like the right thing.
Like the right thing, and there's some spiritual dimension to this as well, like a calling. As I've matured, really tapping more into topics of what I would maybe call ultimate concern, like why am I really here, and what contribution do I want to make before I die?
Oh, the big heavy stuff. Mm-hmm. So the brain, in terms of pro and con list, that doesn't really fit in as much.
It does. I weigh that. I mean, as a Enneagram 7, I mean, it's a thinking type, so I definitely use my mind quite a bit and ruminate quite a bit. But at the end of the day, when the decision needs to be made, it feels to me more often to be an intuitive choice rather than something of analytical rigor.
So not the brain weighs in, but it is not the leader of the decision, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I found it's part of it. I found that as a thinking type, my thinking center is simultaneously can be one of my strongest gifts, but it can also be one of my biggest detriments. Yeah. As I get lost in the rumination and thinking of all the different permutations and possibilities. Which
then can lead to analysis paralysis.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing the Enneagram, because I got just exposed to it this last summer, and I've been part of a lot of different personality tests because I've always been a student and a practitioner of the more self-aware you are about how you do things, the more in tune with how you can do things. It just everything makes more sense and makes it easier. So that
know thyself.
Yeah,
right?
Know thyself.
Yes.
So, but I think I appreciate you sharing that, because then I'm also learning more about what the different types are. And how it's funny when you find out your type, then you start looking at everybody else's type. And like I said, I wanted to be a 7.
Yeah, and we all have each of these typologies.
Yeah.
It's just which ones our personality from our family of origin, culture of origin, or upbringing. What were the adaptive strategies that we employed in order to survive. Mm-hmm. And this forms our personality construct in one of these 9 typologies.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are...
We dive right in.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, that gives us a good insight as to Kent and who you are. So you're a Chief Evolutionary Officer. So tell us a little bit about what that means, and then we'll go back to how did I get here?
Yeah, for sure. So this was a role that I gave myself working with a company that is really focused on how do people learn to understand themselves more deeply, and how do we start to make conscious choices in our own evolution and who we want to become and who we feel like we're being called to become. Mm-hmm. And as I have a biology and psychology background, but as I have been a steward of the human experience in organizations over the past 25 years, what I've come to realize is that we're all more of a process of becoming than anything that's solid or concrete.
Wow, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's like, it's the journey, not the destination, right? As
Exactly.
human beings, we're becoming
Always.
all the time.
Something's always...
There's never an end, well, until
there's an end. But our life, my experience is they're all, it's an ongoing series, just like the seasons of falling away and stepping into, a dying off of, and a who am I becoming, like an inhale and an exhale. I mean, these are just the natural rhythms of existence.
Yeah.
And so if we can hold that more in our framing of what's happening, we're less attached to our identity or our ego, or less controlling in who we think we are, or how things have to be, and we're more able to flex and flow with what actually is arising inside me, what's showing up outside of me, and how do I learn to dance with that. And it's more fluid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Dance with this, play with this. That's a notion I've been really focusing on lately. And part of it is through, the program we just went through together.
Yes.
Which I forgot to
Our
mention.
Self-expression and leadership program. Yeah.
That, that it was a notion of a big part of what I got out of that was, well, how can we play with things?
Yes.
Meaning play with the notion of making bold requests until you get no, instead of being so afraid of maybe a bold request or afraid of the word no. But how do you play with something?
Exactly.
So the same thing, right? How do you dance with it?
Exactly.
And see how it fits, and don't be so caught up in success, failure, all of that stuff, right? Because that just puts people in fear. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And locks us up. Yep.
So, I get this Chief Evolutionary Officer as it relates kind of to HR. I see that a little bit. Did you, since you were in HR for so long, did you always want to be in HR? I mean, you mentioned, you said a biology and a...
Yeah, so this is one of these things that our careers don't always follow a progression of how we've planned them to be. I mean, I thought
Rarely, by the way, in all the interviews I've done.
Totally. I mean, in college, I thought I wanted to be a doctor or physical therapist or something of that nature. Being an athlete, like just enamored with the human body and how we work and move and perform and all that. Yeah. So as I got deep into my my curriculum and met chemistry and organic chemistry, I was like, oh gosh, this became pretty overwhelming for me. And so I added the psychology part. And then I asked the question, I graduate with a biology psychology degree, what does one do?
Yeah, what do you
if you're not going to go? So I went into sales.
Because you had to make a living.
Because I had to make a living.
Yeah,
it was a 100% commission sales job. I love relating with people, meeting people. It was a company that, I don't know if you remember these commercials. It's like, if you have an invention or an idea that you would like to call the National Invention Center at blah, 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 blah. Have you ever
I remember that.
So I was one of these guys that would meet with people, aspiring inventors or entrepreneurs, and meet with them about their idea, and our company would sell research and feasibility studies around their particular idea and would help them with patent searches and hopefully bring their idea to market. And it was interesting as I was in that and learning how to make lots of phone calls, influence people, schedule meetings, consult, ask questions, sell, all that kind of stuff. And I found out that the company wasn't necessarily in integrity with what they said they were doing and what they were doing. And it ended up, this was the first thing in my career. It's like, oh my gosh, here I am representing a company, representing a service, and I'm speaking to what I was taught to say to people, and I was selling things, and then we weren't doing what we said we were going to be doing. And as I learned this was my first, like, oh gosh, I'm out of integrity. Yeah. I need to do something about this. And so I just bought my first condo. I was like 25 years old. And just had my first apartment for just getting started. Totally. And in this moment of, oh my gosh, like, we aren't who we say we are, and these people are buying me as the voice of the company, so I'm not who I am saying I am. And I ended up quitting.
Yeah. Well, how long were you there? How long?
About a year and a half.
Because it takes a while to kind of recognize that you're out of integrity, right? Sometimes you just don't know why you're not feeling comfortable.
Yep.
What was there? Was there a moment, or can you help share that? Because this is what I think people just starting out, young people especially, you get that first job, you're all excited. You don't want to recognize that maybe the tarnish is coming off of the shiny gold thing, right? And then you start going, wow, this isn't quite, and you don't even know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, so yes. So there was a moment where I was I was working with my boss, and we were going over our monthly projections. How many reports are you going to sell? How many meetings do you have set up? Doing your forecasting, right? And I noticed that as I was there longer and longer, the conversation became more about just the math and the number. Like, it was a numbers game versus we really care about this person. And, we were taught to get the person to put our fees on their credit card, get them to borrow money from their parents. And I'm like, this is starting to feel more like I'm trying to fleece people and prey on their hopes and dreams that their innovation might make them famous or rich someday. And we were more playing on that to coerce money out of them. And then I found that the reports that we were offering to our clients were largely boilerplate. And the majority of the fees that they were paying us would go to buy advertising so we could get more leads and entice more people to come and try to get their ideas to market. And we would do boilerplate reports, and people they wouldn't know. But I'm like, every one of these reports is the same thing.
Yeah, so you're recognizing this research isn't really helping.
This isn't really helping.
And they're really not going to be able to launch their product.
Correct. Yeah.
So you decide you're going to leave. Do you have something else lined up?
I have nothing else lined up. It was one of those moments. I'm like, I'm out of integrity, and I have to resolve that right now. And I just had this intuition, like, I'm going to do the right thing, and the next right thing is going to show up. And I have to take action to make it show up. So I remember, this is before the internet, right? This is right. This is early 90s, before we had computers and before we could look up stuff. And I remember our office was in a shared office space, and there was a gentleman that I became friends with who was about 10 years older than I am. And I knew he had just left his company to go work for a startup technology company. And I knew it was in the general area of where we lived. So I just started driving and I knew what kind of car he drove.
So you become a stalker?
I became a professional stalker, yes. But I drove around parking lots for a couple days till I found his car. And then I saw the logo of and I went in and I set up a meeting with him, and it's like, Tom, I just resigned my job and I need something to do. What are you guys doing here?
Wow, that's bold.
Totally. And so I went from a 100% commission sales job, not making a ton of money, but doing okay, to then the skill that I learned from that job that they really picked up on was this man knows how to make phone calls. He knows how to follow up with people. He knows how to build relationships. He knows how to ask questions. He knows how to generate interest. So this was a startup tech company, pre-dot-com boom. And they said, we're going to create a role for you. You're going to be a teletargeter. So we would go to trade shows and show our technology, and, people would swipe their conference badge, and I would just get all these stacks of papers of people that had stopped by our booth inquiring about what our company was up to, and my job was to call them, see what they're doing, how do they make decisions about application development, do they outsource this kind of stuff, and I would build a profile of who this person is, what context they're working within, and then I would hand it off to someone who actually knew what they were talking about in the technology space so they could have a more productive conversation. And one of those calls led to a relationship with Sun Microsystems, and we became a professional services implementer of the hardware that they were installing in a lot of companies. And from that relationship, we all of a sudden needed to hire a ton of people. So they said, Kent, how would you think about recruiting? And I'm like, what's recruiting? They're like, well, we need to hire people. I'm like, well, I needed a job, and it was great to find a job. I would love to help people find jobs. And that was my launch into HR.
Wow.
Yes.
So from sales to teletargeting,
yes,
which is the sales role.
Sales role, pre-sales, right?
Yeah. A lot of it, but I think the core thing there is about not being afraid to be around people and talk to people and find out what's going on for them and what they're trying to do.
Exactly.
And so it's all about relationships.
Totally.
So then now all of a sudden you're helping them hire people.
Yeah. So here comes integrity check number 2, right? So I'm in this organization for a couple years, and we're growing, and I'm hiring people, and they're out at the client site. And again, part of what I was told we were creating in our organization was a company that really cared about its people, we weren't treating people like billable resources just to have them remain out of the client site, never to ever be seen again, and just, keep the taxi meter going. And so I would be selling learning and development opportunities. I'd be selling bench time, like to just kind of relax and rejuvenate after projects closed. And that wasn't happening. And people that I hired started calling me. Kent, I've been at Bell South for the last year. I haven't been home to see my family or friends. And this isn't what you said it was going to be. I'm like, oh.
It's not?
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Many times you don't know, right?
I don't know.
Because you're not running the day-to-day.
Because I'm not running the day-to-day. And so I hear this, and so I go to the CEO of the company. I'm like, hey, I'm getting calls from some of our folks in the field wanting some time off, but like wanting to recharge, wanting to see their families, wanting to get some training, and not just be, and the response I was met with was, you're so young and naive. They're doing great. They're banking their paychecks. They're living off expenses. They're fine. Keep doing your job. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, they're calling me a liar.
Yeah. Yeah.
The party's not matching the invitation. And again, it was met with, you're young, you're naive, just, we're growing, keep it up. And I was like, gosh, this just doesn't feel right. We're treating people like cogs in a wheel and not really honoring what they want and need. And this is when I started getting into Peter Senge's work and the Fifth Discipline and Good to Great, all these books about how do we build, what I'll call now human organizations.
Yeah.
And I saw that we weren't really building one there. And I started interviewing. One of the interviews I had was with one of our client companies who seemed to get it. And when the company found out that I was interviewing with a client, they fired me.
Oh.
So second job, get fired. I'm like,
got a great track record going here. Yeah.
Quit and get fired, right?
But both also weren't aligning with your values and
Totally.
integrity. So
yeah, and this was one of those moments where what I thought was the end of the world. Like, I've got a mortgage, I've got car payments, and now again I don't have a job. And serendipity as it is, I got a call from a recruiter about a company that had just gone public in the technology space up in New York City. So I went up and met with them, and come to find that this whole company and their culture was all about this stuff. It was all about, like, we're changing the way the world works, our culture and our people and our values. This is what we're really living into.
Yeah.
And I was
Well,
like,
and this is like mid-90s.
This is 96, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is still pretty early to be so culture focused, because I
Totally,
remember it was,
totally.
I was working in the 90s as well, and we had, good learning and development where I was, but it was all about the results and the numbers, and yeah, you can go do some training. At least we had a training department, and they're investing in that way. But interesting.
Yeah, and we had the results and the numbers. In fact, our results and our numbers and our client satisfaction and our employee satisfaction was way higher
than anybody else.
Than anyone else, because we were focused on the human element first and foremost, and our culture, and what we were really building towards that was bigger than just a quarterly financial target. But we recognized that we were existing in a particular time in history where the way we all live, work, and play was fundamentally changing. And we had a different business model where a lot of the early technology companies would create their projects on a time and materials basis, and the job was to grow scope and keep us billable. Our company this was Sapiens, we took a very different approach. We said, we're going to do our work on a fixed time, fixed price basis, and if we misestimate, we're going to eat the difference.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And we brought our clients, cross-functional stakeholders, out of their silos, out of their offices. We brought them to our locations and got really talented at facilitating multi-stakeholder conversations to get buy-in across all the different people that needed to buy into. Like, we're fundamentally changing the way our company operates by implementing technology.
Well, and that's what shortcuts those kind of big projects, because that's typically because my experience was in managing large programs and projects, and that's always where it broke down. We didn't have stakeholder buy-in.
Exactly.
You thought you did.
Right.
And then you got partway through it, and things are slowing down, and then you got to escalate, and blah, blah, blah. Wow, okay. Well, great.
So I feel so blessed to have quit and gotten fired to end up in this organization where I was there for 5 years, and I saw this organization and the whole industry blow up. We went from like 400 people when I joined in 96 to 2001. We were like 5,000 people. We had offices all over the world.
And was this an HR role that you were
recruiting.
in? Recruiting.
I was running recruiting for our New York office. Yeah.
Wow. So did you end up moving to New York City then?
Jersey City, yeah.
Jersey City, okay.
And we had offices in Jersey City and in Manhattan. So, yeah, I was up in the Hoboken, Jersey City area.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So then what brings you to Colorado? Or are there some other steps in this?
Oh, my gosh. Kathy, I've been all over the place. Colorado, I ended up here after stops in New York, Scottsdale, Dallas, San Diego, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and now Denver.
Wow. Okay. And was it all with the same company then?
No,
or did you
different companies, different
okay.
reasons. Some of them were work related. Some of them were just wanderlust and like I need to go live in a different part of the country. I'd been in the Northeast for 34 years. I was married. My first marriage ended. And I was like, gosh, I don't have anything tying me necessarily to the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. And I had some friends that had moved to Arizona. And I was like, why not?
Yeah.
This is one of those moments where I didn't have a job there. I just said, I'm going to go to Arizona and see what happens.
Very cool. And then you get to Arizona, do you get a job there? And
I got a job. This was one of my friends was selling commercial real estate and doing pretty well financially. So I'm like, oh, like this seems like some of the similar things. You make calls, you build relationships, you understand what the assets are, and you make money. And I found out that industry is always about the math. And the broker community, at least where I wasn't necessarily playing nicely. And so I sold one $2.5 million building while I was there. Got a nice commission off of that to learn that I don't want to do commercial real estate.
Yeah. But you probably had to get a license to do
I did.
that.
Yeah,
too.
I went to real estate school. It's a funny story. I got to sit. Do you know Emmett Smith?
Yeah.
I got to sit next to Emmett and got to hang out with Emmett for a couple weeks as we were going through this, getting our real estate
You're
license.
both going through it together.
He and I ended up going out for dinner one night. It was great. One of the nicest men I've ever met.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
NFL's all-time leading rusher. And here I am having dinner with him. It's great.
And probably sitting next to him studying and, going to class and all of that. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, but so realizing, here's where a theme starts to show up. It's like, oh gosh, these entities that are caring more about the financial outcomes than the human outcomes. Mm-hmm. And this is where I start to identify that particular value that I have. And so when I left the commercial real estate space, I went back into HR for the largest public home builder in the U.S., Centex Homes, in their Arizona division, which was it was the fastest growing new home building market in the country at the time.
Is this like early 2000s then?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So spent some time with Centex there, and Centex had never really, they were a 60-year-old company, they never really had HR. And then the board at one point in time stipulated, you need a head of HR, like a legit head of HR. We're a $14 billion company.
Yeah, and they didn't have a...
They didn't it was a conglomeration of 50 some odd mom and pop home building operations all across the country. Mm-hmm. And each of those locales kind of had their own vendors, had their own product, had their own way of relating. And there was all kinds of inefficiencies in our supply chain and our ability to purchase. And so as we were realizing, oh my gosh, we need to grow up as a company, we need to kind of standardize some of these things, and we can't have all these different, it was wild, wild west. All these different home builders were kind of doing whatever they wanted to do.
Well, a lot of companies do that, right? They grow through acquisition with the intention of, we'll merge them all together at some point, but they never want to hit the pause button to do the merge.
Yeah.
You merge while you're on the fly, which doesn't work, and
Yeah.
So you have to start bringing in some standards.
Exactly.
And that's what you were doing.
And that's what I was doing.
Cool.
So I was one of the first HR people the company had hired in a local business unit. Mm-hmm. I, from my perspective, had a very awake, aware president of that home building operation where he's like, we're all about the people. We build homes for people. Like, this is where their lives unfold.
So he wasn't about the
So he wasn't just about the numbers. I was like, oh, wow, here's someone who really cares about community and the human condition, both for our employees and for the communities that we're literally building, big master plan communities. So having some success in building our Arizona operations, as the corporation hired a head of HR, I'm like, hey, Joe, you need to understand what I've been doing. There aren't a lot of people like me out in these divisions, and I have some ideas. If you're looking to standardize some of our practices around recruiting, around hiring, around promotions and performance, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like here's how we were doing it in the Arizona division. It seemed to work pretty well. So I got promoted to my first big corporate VP job at 36 years old, moved to Dallas,
Wow.
and became, VP of HR for this company, trying to see how are we going to standardize our people practices across a $14 billion organization that has never had them before.
So now
and has division presidents saying get out of my kitchen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They weren't. The division presidents weren't like the one that you were working with that automatically got it. So now you're trying to influence someone on a new way of thinking, not just a new way of doing business. So
Correct.
it was kind of both. Wow, that's not easy.
No.
Not easy.
No. And so, here's another trend, right? So I got to ride the rise of the dot-com boom and then the subsequent bust. And now we're all familiar with the housing boom that happened in early 2000s and the lending regulations that got relaxed and then we got to see this.
Relaxed and then abused.
Relaxed and abused, and I got to run the first ever corporate layoff that this company had ever had. And here's this 36-year-old guy telling people that have devoted their lives to this company, some of whom have been there 20, 30 years. And I'm like, sorry, time for you to go.
No.
The math's not working. When we were really trying to just maximize how much we could get out of this boom cycle. And again, I'm realizing, gosh, this is so much, here I am feeling like I've ascended the corporate hierarchy, and I'm like, is this how the game's played? Really? And I started to become really disenfranchised with the whole corporatocracy. And I got laid off as we downsized because of the crash in 2008. And this is another thing. I'm like, oh gosh, how's this gonna play out for me? But it was really great. I got a nice severance, and then I got to choose who do I really want to work for? Because now I have more awareness.
Yeah.
And I got introduced to Petco in San Diego, and as I was meeting the head of HR, who's still a dear friend of mine, Charlie Piscitello, the first thing he says to me is, "Kent, we're in the love business."
Ah, that's a different tagline, right?
Totally. I'm like, say some more.
Yeah.
He's like, well, we're in business to support and enhance the love that exists between pets and pet parents. I'm like, this is good stuff.
Yeah, this sounds like fun.
This sounds like fun. Yeah, so I moved to San Diego and joined Petco, and really got to play in that space of how do we really attend to the love that exists in a family unit as pets became less of stay outside, and now they're sleeping in our beds, and not they're really family members. And how do we build an organization that really helps promote and support family with pets? Very
cool. So talk a little bit about how, since this podcast is for people who are in transition or stuck. I mean, I know when I got laid off, I had survived many layoffs before that. And then when you get laid off, your first reaction is, oh, it's not me, it's the situation. And then a few weeks in, all of a sudden, it's me. I mean, there's it's tough. And in fact, I remember a friend of mine after she got laid off, and I was just trying to circle back with her, make sure she was okay. She said that it was really helpful that I shared how I felt and how I had said, it's really just a situation. It's not you. And I know you feel like it's you, but you really have to differentiate that. But how did you get through that, and how did you find Petco? I mean, that's what's frustrating so many times is you're in this situation, you're looking, and it seems like it's the black hole, and but yet you find this wonderful, we're in the love business, it aligns with who you are. And
it's relationships. So while I was at Centex, we got to meet a wonderful man named Jim Howden, who's the CEO of a company called Root Learning, and we had used them for some of our learning initiatives at Centex. And he is also friends with Charlie at Petco. So as I said, Jim, hey, I just left Centex. I'm looking to stay West Coast. If you know of any, forward-thinking HR leaders, with companies that are actually up to something beyond just trying to figure out how much money they can make, I'd really appreciate any introductions you could make on my behalf. And so he brokered the introduction with Charlie.
Wow.
And Charlie and I hit it off, and that's how that came about. So relationships.
Yeah, relationships. But also
values, shared values.
I was going to say, what I appreciate there was that you were pretty clear about what you were looking for. It's not, hey, I need a job. Do you know anyone looking? It was, no, here's the criteria at which I think I could add value. Forward thinking, values. Okay.
Yes, stewarding the human condition, both internally within the organization and also caring for the human condition as we're offering services and products to people.
Yeah. And sometimes I think people are afraid maybe to even articulate that they want those kind of values, because they almost think, well, I have to prove my technical skills first, or I have to get the right fit. Then when I'm there, but the thing is if that stuff isn't working, it's never going to work, right? Whether you
sure.
if the values aren't aligned, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
Even in the interview, it's not
Correct.
even worth interviewing, right?
Correct.
And
you're exactly right. It's easier to teach skills than it is to embed values in someone or shift values. So much is what do we really care about, and do we have alignment on these things? Because I can teach you how to code, I can teach you how to run reports, I can teach you how to do whatever, but I can't teach an inherent value that one lives their life by.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so you're at Petco.
Yep. So now I'm at Petco, and this is a time where I met one of my mentors. I was organizing a retreat for, I was supporting all the corporate functions, and I had a business partner who was supporting all of our retail stores. And so I was organizing a retreat for our senior leaders of the corporate functions, and I wanted to participate as a part of the group, not facilitate it myself. And so I hired an external person to come in and help us facilitate. And I met this man.
Yeah, because you're a leader in the
Because
organization.
I'm a leader in the organization too. I want to participate,
yeah.
not
feel
just
like an outsider
Exactly.
to your leadership team. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hired this man, Steve Benson. Steve's in his mid-60s now. But there was something very distinct about him when I met him. As he's sitting in my office, he had a presence unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I mean, it was palpable. And it so much so it was distracting. At one point, I'm just like, I said, how did you create that? He's like, what? I'm like, this presence you have, it's just so deep. And I'm like, I want to learn how to, because, getting back to our Enneagram thing, I was like, la, 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 but he was just so grounded and listened so deeply. And this is when it was one of these red pill, blue pill moments where he opened up the curtain to a whole world of personal development, integral theory. I don't know if you're familiar with Ken Wilber and his work. But it's his whole big body of work that studied the history of human experience, and he created a map or a series of lenses that would allow for how can one... So here, Wilber's premise was, over the history of humanity, whether you're looking at science, religion, whatever the context is, he's like, what if everyone who's ever tried to explain what's happening was right, partially? And is there a way that I can construct a map that allows for all these different perspectives about what's happening to be right, partially?
Partially.
Partially. And have them fit in a more coherent whole.
Versus the not right
versus
argument.
Not right, wrong, yes,
Yeah.
good, bad,
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. And this took me into, I was like, oh gosh, I need to break away from my corporate life for a while and do some deep inner work. So I resigned from Petco and enrolled myself in a 2-year adult development program or coaching program in Canada based on Ken Wilber's integral theory and the leading edge adult development coming out of Harvard or consciousness studies, and learned a whole host of distinctions and lenses that I can use as a practitioner of helping to transform and evolve a human being mindfully, consciously, with careful discernment, not just haphazardly, letting the wind blow me wherever I think I might end up. So this was a profound
this
shift,
pivotal moment
in my life. Yeah. where kind of the veil gets peeled back, and self as lab rat, trying to understand all the different ways I've tried to make sense of myself, make sense of relationships, make sense of the world. And now I have a whole set of lenses that help me organize this and see the interrelatedness of all these perspectives, such that I can make some coherent sense out of what's happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to answer. So wow. So is that how, when you now hearing that, Chief Evolutionary Officer, makes total sense.
Totally. So so this was a 2-year period where it was really a deep dive into my own psyche, my own way of relating to self, others, work, and the world. And it's this moment that I was like, oh, this is what my life's going to be about. Helping others navigate their life transitions and transformations with some skillful means and some support, and not feel so at the effect of what's happening to them. And so I said, oh, cool, I'm going to start coaching people in transition, mostly around career, because this work thing is, we have so much of our identity wrapped up in our vocation. It's how we provide food and shelter and meet our survival needs. And so when that gets stripped away from us, our sense of okayness or survival in the world is threatened.
Yeah.
Right? So how can I really be of service to people that have this part of their lives either intentionally or unintentionally interrupted, and now they have to make new sense of who I'm going to be in the world and how I'm going to meet my survival needs, and what does work really mean for me, as I juxtapose that with my sense of self and what I want and need and the people that matter most to me in my life. So this became the world that I live in, is helping people balance those. The author David White calls them these 3 marriages, these 3 enduring commitments that we all have over a life. Our commitment to ourself and our own well-being, health and happiness, our commitment to the people that matter most, spouse, partner, kids, parents, friends, and our commitment to our life's work. And how do we create a narrative that allows all of these things to be more in harmony with one another, rather than pull us apart, where I feel like I'm borrowing from work to attend to my family, or I'm borrowing from my family to attend to my own needs. Like, what's the narrative I can create that holds all of these
all that together?
And
there's never enough time for all of it, right?
Yeah.
This draw that I got way too much work to do. My family is, I don't have enough time there, and I feel the guilt that I'm not spending it there.
And I have no time for myself.
Yeah, and when do I have my time for, physical fitness and spiritual well-being and all these things? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so this brought me to conscious capitalism. I don't know if you're familiar with this movement. It's a group of leaders that said, gosh, capitalism has been one of the most successful systems of human cooperation that has ever been created. And it has enhanced and enriched humanity's longevity, standards of living for millions and millions and millions of people. And with a motive that's largely a profit-driven motive, we have wreaked havoc on the human well-being, we've wreaked havoc on the environment, and we've prioritized the shareholder over any other stakeholder. So conscious capitalism invites us into a conversation about, well, what's the purpose of an organization that includes and transcends a profit motive that's actually pointed towards elevating humanity in some way? And how do we operate in a stakeholder relationship model that doesn't prioritize a shareholder at the detriment of all these other stakeholders like society or your employees or your customers or the environment? But how do we really hold our wake in the world in its totality?
So have both.
Capitalism
and consciousness.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got involved in that. I helped launch the San Francisco chapter of Conscious Capitalism San Francisco. And ran out of money. This is another point. Like, this is where I became this broke musician. I had largely been a cover guy, playing other people's music and hiding behind, like, I'll play the songs I know everyone likes, and I'll play them really well so people will like me, and I'll be adored and revered, and everyone will have a good time. And so as I'm in San Francisco and I'm really exploring self, work, relationship, music started coming through me. I started writing songs for the first. It started coming through me. Wow. Yeah, it was more like I'm hearing this versus I'm sitting down to actually try to write a song. I just got tuned into something in a differentiated way, and it was in that moment I'm like, oh my gosh, that declaration I made in college of never wanting to be the broke musician has actually just happened, and I've never been happier. The thing I feared most.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we've now come full circle, and we do need to start wrapping up.
Yeah.
So, on that note, if you look back to yourself in college, what would you have been able to hear that maybe would have helped you through life? And I know it's hard because at that age, sometimes you can't hear.
We're totally.
I mean, not literally. It's just, it doesn't sink in, it doesn't make sense. Or even like you were so sure you wanted to be the broke musician, and yet that's where you ended up. And it was okay.
And it was
fantastic, actually.
Yeah. So,
Is there something that you think you could share with young people starting out, or that you would have?
Yeah, to me, it gets to not holding things in such a binary way. I'm either going to be this or I'm going to be that. And how could I have found a way to actually be a musician in a way I wanted to, and have...
And, the key word there is and.
Exactly. Exactly. So don't shut down one's heartfelt passions and shut that off for a substantial period of one's life, because I feel like it's an either or choice. And like literally killing off part of my soul, not feeding that part of me that really wants to be expressed. How can I find a way to include that in what I'm up to and not make it such an either or thing?
Yeah. I'm finding that with several of the younger people I'm interviewing now. They're young now, and they're saying things like, well, I needed a job, so I went and got this job. Now I'm starting the side gig, which was, I had this passion, I tried to make the passion work, it didn't really work, so then I got this other job. But yet now they're like, now I can fund that, and I can have time for that, and so it is really the and.
It is the and.
It is the and. Well, Kent, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story and your insight. This has been fantastic, and I've picked up a lot of nuggets here about, say that again, capitalism?
Conscious capitalism.
Conscious capitalism. And I'm going to have to look up that. And Ken Wilber, is that?
Ken Wilber. Yep.
Wilber.
Yeah, an integral theory, sometimes referred to as a theory of everything, because it gives room for everything.
It does. Wow. Okay. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So
Great.
Thank you. And listeners, if you like today's podcast, please like and subscribe to the podcast, and you'll be alerted of new podcasts that are coming out, new interviews. You can also find all of the other interviews I've done. Kent is actually, I think, number 27.
Hey!
Yay! And he will be published in February. And so anyway, please go to my website, lifestorycurator.com. You can post comments there. You can post questions for me or for Kent. I'll get them to him. I'll also post any website information, so if people want to get a hold of you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Kent H. Frazier, FRAZIER.com is my personal website. And a new one I just launched is a program I'm offering called Being Fully Human at Work. And so you can go to fullyhumanatwork.com and find information there about programs if you're interested in how do I be more myself and more human in my work choices.
Wow. Well, fantastic. And I want to reserve the right to come back to you in about 6 months to a year.
Totally.
And hear all about what this new endeavor is going to bring for you. So
I would love that. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you so much.